good, all of you beautiful people out there? How are y'all doing today? That is fantastic. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the channel. As you noticed, not my usual setting or my usual setup. I am on vacation right now. I'm out of town for a wedding, so I am here still bringing this to you guys because we still have 2 more videos to bang out. And today we are going to be talking about the AFC West. Kickoff is tonight at the release of this video, and one of these teams will be playing in that kickoff game, that being the Kansas City Chiefs, your defending Super Bowl champions. But before we get into the video, I like to ask, if you have not already, please like, subscribe, and share the video if you have not done so already. Or if you know anybody who would enjoy this type of content, share this with them. Helps get more eyeballs on the product, get us out to more viewers. So if you have not done that and you'd like to, that would be greatly appreciated. Also, if you have not already, go follow me on Patreon at patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports to help support the channel, help put food in my belly. That would be greatly appreciated. If you have not done so already, the links to that will be in the description down below. But let's get on with the video. The AFC West, this was the division that last year, of how people were kind of viewing the AFC West, or AFC East rather, this year. People thought last year that it was going to be more of a bloodbath. It was going to be, every team was going to be going at it. There were going to be 4 great teams that were all Super Bowl caliber teams. And it didn't really turn out that way. It was more so the Kansas City Chiefs and everybody else, with the Chargers sneaking into the postseason, and then the 2 other teams being just massive disappointments, one more so than the other. And we're going to be talking about that. Is it going to be any different this year? Is it going to be the exact same? Well, let's talk about it. You guys know the deal by now. We're going to be going through each division, each position ranking, 1 through 4 in this division, how they stack up against each other. And we are going to start off, as always, with the quarterback position. And if you have anybody else other than Patrick Mahomes, then you are either a hater or you don't know football. He is not just the best quarterback in this division, he's the best quarterback, period, in all of football, and it's not even a debate. I don't think anything really needs to be said about that. And then number 2, to me, is also a clear number 2 in Justin Herbert. And I will admit, I was not anticipating Justin Herbert to be this great when he came out of Oregon. I mean, I don't know if it's like a bad thing to say, because many people weren't on the Justin Herbert train back in 2020. But he has asserted himself as one of the elites in the NFL. I don't know if he's top 5 per se, but he is at worst a top 8 quarterback in the NFL. One of the strongest arms in the league for sure. And yeah, he is by far the best quarterback that the Chargers have had since Phillip Rivers, and one of the better quarterbacks in the league. And then 3 and 4, this gets interesting, because I'm going to talk about number 4 first with Jimmy Garoppolo. And, I saw it not as an upgrade or even really a downgrade for the Raiders going from Derek Carr to Jimmy Garoppolo, because to me, they're pretty much the exact same quarterback. They're just solid quarterbacks with solid starters, they're solid starters, just they're not good enough to really win you a championship. There are more quarterbacks you win with, not necessarily because of. And your ceiling is only so high with them. And I don't really see this as a huge upgrade from Derek Carr to Jimmy Garoppolo. I do think Garoppolo, with the right supporting cast around him, can be better than Derek Carr. But, it's not really much of an improvement. You're pretty much going to get the exact same quarterback play as you would have if Derek Carr was on his game last year, which he wasn't. So I guess in that regard, it would be a bit of an upgrade, especially considering Garoppolo is worked with McDaniels before when he was a backup in New England, so he knows the system, so that's at least something. And then number 3 with Russell Wilson, and this was the trickiest thing. I have no idea how to view Russell Wilson, because last year was such a shit show. And it is a thing where he was a great quarterback. He was consistently viewed as a top 5 quarterback over the last 5 years when he was in Seattle. And then he goes to Denver last year. Everyone was assuming that he was the guy that was going to take this Broncos team that was locked and loaded, ready to go and take him over the hump. And they just shat the bed in the biggest way possible. And why was that? Some people say it was Nathaniel Hackett was the sole problem. Some people say Russ was the sole problem. To me, it was a mixture of both. Yeah, Hackett was a horrible head coaching hire that didn't even make it through a full season. But Russ was not blameless. He didn't look like the old Russ. He's definitely lost a bit of his athleticism. He wanted to play more from the pocket, but he's never been a quarterback that's been great from within structure. So, and even his reads and his ability to throw the ball has kind of taken a bit of a downtick. He saw that last year where it was like he had lost a bit of confidence. And it's tough for a quarterback to, once you lose your confidence, to get that back. So I have no idea how to view him. There's a situation where with Sean Payton coming in as the new head coach that he will right the ship and Russ will go back to the Russ of old. But there's also a situation where Russ stays exactly where he is and he could be gone by the end of the year, depending on how movable his contract is. That is a real possibility here. So I have no idea what to do with Russell Wilson in that regard, because he can either be really good or really bad, and to me there's really no in between with him. But let's move off of the quarterbacks and talk about these running backs a little bit. And to me it is number one with the Las Vegas Raiders and Josh Jacobs, who just came back from a holdout, finally settled on a one-year deal with a bit of a tender attached to it. And Josh Jacobs, he really showed last year. He was really kind of almost insulted of the fact that the Raiders didn't pick up his fifth-year option, and he showed them how stupid they were to not do that because he lit it up last year, led the league in rushing, and that was sort of a breakout year for him. He was always a really good running back throughout his entire career, but last year he really asserted himself as one of the elites in the league. And the question is, was last year a fluke? I personally don't think he is because he is such a great runner with great contact balance, and he's one of the more powerful running backs in the league. So I expect Josh Jacobs to perform just as well as he did last year. Maybe a bit of a downtick, but I still expect him to be considered as one of the elite running backs in the league. And then Zamir White is a solid backup to have in the event that Josh Jacobs, something happens to him or something freakish happens. He's a okay, capable backup to have back there, and he's kind of similar to Josh Jacobs in a lot of ways, so it's not the worst thing to have. And then number two, talk about a running back that was holding out and didn't get what he expected in Austin Eckler, who is up there with Christian McCaffrey as one of the most lethal just weapons in football, not just from the running back position, but just offensive weapons in the entire league. A great runner. He's sort of like, he's short, but he's also really thick. Like, he is incredibly hard to take down, but he's also really shifty as well. He's got a nice bit of power to him, but really shifty, really elusive, and he is a phenomenal receiving back. Probably the best receiving back in the league outside of Christian McCaffrey. And he is one of the best, like I said, he's one of the best offensive weapons in the NFL. And thank God they were able to get him back. Especially considering Joshua Kelly, the backup here, is not the best. He's not very, he's okay in spurts, but you don't want him taking the full-time load. And then number three with Denver is an interesting one to talk about because Javonte Williams, had a really good rookie year. I expect him to have a breakout year last year, but never got the opportunity to because he blew out his knee. So he will come back this year, hopefully fully healthy, and hopefully have the breakout that I expect him to have because Javonte Williams was one of the more fun running backs in the NFL to watch. He's just so powerful. It takes about 2-3 guys to hit him before he finally even thinks about going down. And he's one of the strongest runners, if not the strongest runner in the NFL. He just has this unhumane ability to just run through arm tackles and just run through tacklers with pretty much ease. He's probably the toughest running back in the league, if not the toughest player in the league to tackle one-on-one. And then his backup is Samaje Perine, who over the last couple of years in Cincinnati has asserted himself as one of the best third down running backs in the league. He's been around the league for a while, but really good receiving back. Decent as a pure in between the tackles runner, but as a third down back, he's really good in pass protection, excellent out of the backfield as a receiver. Yeah, he's just one of the better third down backs to have, and he's kind of a perfect complement to Javonte Williams in that way. And then number 4 is the Kansas City Chiefs. This will be the only group where they will rank last on offense, mainly just because they don't have the star power in this position group the way that the other 3 teams do. Isaiah Pacheco emerged as an undrafted free agent last year. He was really good as a rookie, not like a superstar or anything, but he was just really good and sound at everything, really good as a pure rusher, and he's just fine. There's definitely higher upside backs, I mean, even just in this division alone, but you're not upset with him being your number 1 back. And then Isaiah Pacheco, he's not much of a receiving threat out of the backfield, but that's what you have Jerick McKinnon for. McKinnon's been in the league for a while now, and he's the opposite of Pacheco. Not a big guy, not the strongest runner, not the best as a pure in-between-the-tackle runner, but he is excellent out of the backfield as a pure receiver. So, again, they're just a really solid 1-2 punch with assets that the other guys don't have. Now let's move on to these receiving cores, and these are really, really interesting and fascinating to talk about. Number 1, to me, is the Kansas City Chiefs, and many people will say that that's a hot take or look at that as like, well, why? Because on paper, your top 3 receivers are Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who's just a okay deep threat, Kadarius Toney, who's really more of a danger as a return man, and then Sky Moore, who had a fine rookie year, is on the uptick, but is just really a okay slot receiver at the moment in time. And many people would say, well, why are they the best receiving core in this division for me? And that's really just one reason and one reason only. As long as Travis Kelce's here, it doesn't matter what the rest of the receiving core looks like. Travis Kelce is the best tight end in the NFL. His rapport with Patrick Mahomes is insane to look at. I don't think I've ever seen a quarterback-receiver duo, let alone quarterback-tight end duo, that has as much chemistry as Mahomes to Kelce has. And he always just has this weird ability he pisses defensive coordinators off, he pisses fans off because he always seems to be open. Everybody knows that Mahomes is looking Travis Kelce's way. Everyone knows that he is the biggest threat in the receiving game on this team. Everyone knows you need to double him, and yet he always seems to find himself open. And it pisses everybody off. It pisses defensive players off, pisses coordinators off. He is just a headache to deal with because he always seems to find the soft spot in zones. If you run zones against this team, you're screwed because Travis Kelce is always going to find the open zone and Mahomes is always going to hit him 10 times out of 10. And his presence alone makes this the best receiving group in the division because having his presence there alone is going to open up opportunities for the other 3 names that I had just mentioned with them. And then number 2 is this, I almost said the San Diego Chargers, the Los Angeles Chargers. And on paper, this should be number 1, but the reason they're not is because they just need to stay freaking healthy. You know, Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, they're both borderline elite receivers. Keenan Allen has been one of the elite receivers in the league throughout his career. Mike Williams is one of the great jump ball receivers in the NFL. It's just neither guy can stay healthy to save their lives. So their success is all dependent on can they stay healthy for a full 16-game season. And if they're injury prone like that, it's why it's so crucial for them to feel the need to spend a first-round pick on Quentin Johnston, who he was he was a very interesting player in the pre-draft process because I've heard people say they were in love with Quentin Johnston because he is a bigger body receiver that's such a dangerous after the catch threat. And then I've heard other people, be really down on him because despite the fact that he's a big body receiver, he doesn't play like it and he doesn't know how to use his big body to win in contested catch situations, and he is a body catcher and he does have drop issues. So people are very up and down when it comes to Quentin Johnston, but he's a very similar skill set to the Mike Williams and the Keenan Allens that they already have. So their mindset is if one of those guys get hurt, they could just plug Quentin Johnston in and get that same kind of production, if not better. So I don't mind the process whatsoever in that regard. And then Gerald Everett's just a good veteran tight end, much more of a receiving threat than he is a blocker. He's been in the league for a while, so he's just a really good receiving threat from the tight end position. And then number 3 is the Las Vegas Raiders. And Davante Adams is the clear number 1. He's still a top 5 receiver in the NFL, even though his production did take a bit of a downtick from his days in Green Bay. He's still one of the premier route runners in the NFL. He has a great ability to just immediately get a great chemistry with his quarterbacks, whether it be Aaron Rodgers or Derek Carr. He just knows what the quarterback sees at all times and adjusts accordingly. And he's one of the best receivers in the NFL because of that. And then Jakobi Meyers, you could basically say he is a former Raider in a regard based on how a certain game between New England and Las Vegas went last year. So they saw that play and they were like, hey, we need to, if he's going to help us win games, and that when he's not on the team, might as well bring him in onto the team. But, pain aside, Jakobi Meyers is just really solid. He's a really solid guy that you can have in the slot. You'd be more comfortable with him in the slot, but with Hunter Renfrow being here, who, despite having a down year last year, was still one of the better slot receivers in football. As a result, Jakobi Meyers is going to have to play on the outside, and I don't really know how I like that because he's not, he's a good, solid route runner, but he doesn't have a lot of speed. He's not a threat after the catch. So he's brought in because he knows the system with Josh McDaniels extremely well. But outside of that, I don't really know how I view him as a true number 2 on the outside. So, because he doesn't really have the skill set for it. So that's a little concerning. And then Austin Hooper at tight end is just sort of fine. Got a big contract by Cleveland a couple years ago. Didn't really work out. And he's just sort of okay. And then the Denver Broncos at number 4. And this is a group that's already been hit by the injury bug. Jerry Jeudy is listed here, but he's dealing with a hamstring injury. We don't know how long he's going to be out for. And to be honest, I'm kind of done hoping for Jerry Jeudy to break out. I know a lot of people are still holding on to that because of his Alabama days and are like, he can really be like a great deep threat as a phenomenal number 2 and potential number 1. And, we've been waiting and waiting. He's been dealing with injuries, and even when he's been healthy, he, just can't seem to put it together. He has inconsistencies with his hands, inconsistencies as a route runner, and I'm just sort of done praying and hoping Jerry Jeudy breaks out. And then Courtland Sutton is this this team's number 1 receiver, and he's sort of the same thing where like I'm sort of done waiting for him to assert himself as one of the best pure alphas in the league. Physically, he should be, but it's sort of another thing where he's very inconsistent, and he's one of these weird players where he will just make these insane one-handed catches that you're just like, how the hell did he catch that? And then like the next play, he'll drop a wide open curl route, and it's reasons like that where I'm just sort of like, I'm sort of done hoping for him to be a true alpha like many people think he can be. And then outside of that, Marvin Mims, a guy they drafted in the 3rd round, decent receiver coming out of Oklahoma, has some nice speed, so we'll see how he performs at the NFL level. And then Greg Dulcich had some nice flashes last year, is a solid receiving threat as a tight end. We'll see how he performs in his first full year as the starting tight end. But let's move off of the receiving groups, and we're going to now finish off the offense by talking about these O-line units. And to me, Kansas City is a clear number one. The only real question mark on this offense is Donovan Smith, who they brought over from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And he's a solid player. He's been around the league for a long, long time. He's a solid player. It's just he's got to figure out the holding issue. He led the league in holding penalties last year, and he's got to clean that up. But if he does clean it up, he's a really good starting caliber left tackle. And then you get to the other side at right tackle, Jawaan Taylor. He was sort of the big free agent signing from Jacksonville, played really, really well in his final year in Jacksonville. Just a really good all-around starting right tackle that I think will be really, really good alongside this offensive line and make this one of the best offensive lines in the league. There we go. Assuming that it's not already, because this interior is elite, man. Starting with Creed Humphrey at center. I mean, he's been arguably the best center in the NFL since they drafted him back in 2021. It is still mind-numbing that they got him in the back end of the second round that year. But he's come in and he has not just been as advertised, he's been better than advertised. He's one of the smartest players in the NFL from the center position, and he's just a complete dickhead as a run blocker, a solid anchor as a pass protector. You know, he's one of the best, if not the best center in the league at the moment. And then your two guards, Joe Thuney and Trey Smith, are both just as good, and they're borderline elite players. You know, they're both kind of similar. You know, great run blockers, rocks in pass protection. I mean, the reason why this Chiefs team won the Super Bowl last year was because this unit, more specifically the interior, was as dominant as they were. And some might even say they've improved on the tackle position, going from Orlando Brown to Donovan Smith. That could be arguable, but most people agree that it was a definite upgrade going from Andrew Wiley to Jawaan Taylor. And then number two is the Los Angeles Chargers, and this is more of like the pure upside group. But even then, like if these guys stay how they were last year, you still feel pretty confident because Rashawn Slater, they drafted in the first round a couple of years ago, and was kind of the same thing where he was one of the best left tackles in football in just his rookie year. And then last year he got injured, missed a vast majority of the season, and he's coming back healthy this year, and hopefully he picks up right where he left off as one of the best pass protectors in the NFL. And then Zion Johnson, a guy they drafted in the first round last year out of Boston College, had a bit of an up-and-down rookie year, but you expect that out of rookie offensive linemen. But the games he won them big because he is such a great run blocker. He has such a great anchor and pass protection. So he should be even better in his rookie year now that he has 1 year under his belt where he hopefully has adjusted to NFL caliber athletes. And then Corey Linsley, I mean, I say Creed Humphrey's the best center in the NFL, and Corey Linsley is in that conversation with him. He's still in the top five. You know, he was like that in his days in Green Bay, and he's been exactly like that here with the Chargers. Probably the highest IQ of any center in the NFL. He's just so smart in picking out pass protections, picking out blitzers, just as good as most quarterbacks. And he's just really damn good at everything he does and everything they ask of him. He's arguably the best offensive lineman they have here. And then the left side is very interesting because they have two young players that performed really well when asked to last year. Jamari Salyer is moving in at guard after playing left tackle last year after Rashawn Slater went down. He was really damn good as a starting left tackle, and they're moving him in at right guard where some people are saying he was projected better as a guard. And if you get a situation where he plays even better at guard than he did at tackle, and he played pretty well at tackle last year, you're looking at a really good young guard duo in Zion Johnson and Jamir Salyer. And then Trey Pipkins at right tackle played sometimes last year and played fine. He's probably your weak link, but he still played okay, and you're happy if he's your weak link for sure. And then the Denver Broncos at number 3. Garrett Bowles, again, missed most of last year with a broken leg. He's coming back this year, and he's just one of the most solid left tackles that you'll come across. He's just very sound and good at everything. He is the baseline of what a left tackle a franchise left tackle that is, should be. And then Ben Powers, they brought in through free agency. Not a good run blocker. He's kind of very weak in that regard, not really explosive off the line, but he's just a rock in pass protection. He's just kind of like a brick wall that you're just not getting through. And that's really why they brought him in, is because he's such a great pass protector. And that was a struggle for this offensive line last year, was keeping Russ upright. Lloyd Cushenberry as your starting center, he's fine. He's probably your weak link. He's just sort of like a average starting caliber center in the NFL. And there's really nothing else to say about him outside of that. Quinn Miners, he's been probably a fan favorite ever since, even before he got drafted. He was a guy coming out in 2021 where he was like the big guy out of a small Wisconsin D3 school. He just looks like an offensive lineman with the big beer belly, the big gut, lifting with freaking tree trunks. And he was like, that is what an NFL offensive lineman should look like. And they drafted him in the 3rd round, and he has not only looked the part, he's played the part. He's been a really good guard ever since he's come into the league, and he's improved steadily every year. So he's a guy that I expect within a year or two to insert himself as maybe even one of the star level guards in the NFL for sure. And then Mike McGlinchey, he's a guy that I feel like should be better as a guard because he's much better as a run blocker than he's a pass blocker. And you like that because he's a borderline elite run blocker, but you don't really want that trait as your starting right tackle. You prefer him to be like at least as good of a pass protector as he is a run blocker, but he's really not. He's sort of up and down as a pass protector, but they gave him that big contract because he is such a dominant run blocker, and he is an upgrade over what they had last year. And then the Raiders at 4. Really, your only true piece is Colton Miller at left tackle. If you want a true piece, you'd rather it be your left tackle. But he's another guy where he struggled as a rookie many years ago. He was thought of to be a bust, but he has improved year in, year out, and has asserted himself as one of the most solid left tackles in the NFL. He's improved his pass protection technique. He's improved as a run blocker, and he's become one of the better starting caliber left tackles in the NFL, that's for damn sure. And then the rest of this unit, you have a bit of question marks. Maybe outside of Jermaine Illuminor, who's just a fine right tackle. He's been in the league for a long time, bounced around a little bit, and played pretty well last year. But he is 29 years old, so you don't know if he's going to improve much. And then you go into this interior. Andre James as your center is just okay. Greg Van Roten is okay. Dylan Parham is interesting. They spent, a 3rd round pick on him last year. Is a really good athlete, has some athletic tools. So hopefully with a year of learning, year of development, he develops a little more and becomes a good caliber guard. He has the athletic ability to do that. Now let's switch sides of the ball from the offense to the defense, starting with these defensive lines. And these were a lot more underwhelming than I had originally anticipated them to be. Everybody has sort of like that 1-star pass rusher, and then everybody else in the units are just sort of okay. Number 1 is the Chargers, though not by much. Joey Bosa has dealt with some injuries throughout his career, but when he's been on the field, he's been a borderline game wrecker, and he is one of the elite pass rushers in the NFL for sure. And then Khalil Mack, opposite of him, everyone was expecting this to be just a complete, good luck to opposing tackles and opposing offensive line duos. Because, you have Khalil Mack, who's been one of the premier pass rushers throughout his career, and then Joey Bosa being one of the premier pass rushers now. And Khalil Mack has sort of clearly taken a downtick. Age is starting to catch up to him. He's lost a bit of his athleticism, a bit of his explosiveness. He's not the Khalil Mack of old. He's still good. He's still pretty good. It's just he's not the elite game wrecker he once was in his days in Oakland and his days in Chicago. It's just kind of sad in that regard. And then the interior isn't really worth talking about that much. Morgan Fox and Sebastian Joseph Day are just fine starting caliber guys. And then Austin Johnson, I don't really know much about. And then number 2 is the Las Vegas Raiders. Max Crosby has asserted himself as an alpha. That's for damn sure. He's a guy that has just been... He came in as a rookie out of the gate and was getting double-digit sacks. And now he's improved just from a pure pressure standpoint. His pressures have gone up every year. And he has become... I'm not going to say like in the Nick Bosa territory because, guys like Bosa and Parsons are just different level of guys. But Crosby's knocking on the door of that, man. He's really become one of the premier game wreckers in the league for sure. And then Chandler Jones is kind of like what Khalil Mack is for the Chargers, but worse. He's another one of these guys where he was an alpha pass rusher for so many years, and last year he just took a clear dip down in production. He's lost a bit of his athleticism, lost the step. He's just not the Chandler Jones of old anymore. And then the interior, Jerry Tillery is a former first-round bust. And then Bilal Nichols is just okay. And that's pretty much it for that. And then the Denver Broncos at number 3. And they don't have the superstars that the Chargers and Raiders do. But it's still a pretty fine group. Randy Gregory, anything you get out of him, you're really just hoping he plays the full year for once. He's been in the league for about like 5 or 6 years now, has never been able to stay for a full season, whether that be through injuries or suspensions. And when he's been out there, he's been good. It's just how much is he going to be out there for? And then Frank Clark is, for the past couple of years, he's been one of the more overrated players in football. He gets by on name value alone. And everyone was like, oh, Frank Clark, because he was so good in Seattle. And then, he had one great year in Kansas City. And he's just sort of been an average pass rusher. But, that name, Frank Clark, he has the name value, so people think he's better than he actually is. When in actuality, he's just a fine, average pass rusher. And then Zach Allen, they brought in the offseason, had a bit of a breakout year last year, got a big contract. He's sort of been fine throughout his career. Last year was sort of, you wonder if last year was a bit of an anomaly, but who knows? It could be like a Trey Hendrickson situation for the Bengals where he had one breakout year and a contract year, and then he gets signed, and he's been one of the more underrated players in the NFL. So Denver hopes that it's the same exact thing with Zach Allen. And then the interior, DJ Jones is a really good nose tackle. He's sort of one of the more underrated nose tackles in the league. Just sort of a big space eater, really good as a pass rusher, has a good little bit of diversity of pass rush skills, pass rush moves. So he's a really good player to have here. And then I don't really know much about Jonathan Harris, unfortunately. And then number 4 is the Kansas City Chiefs. I will say there is a bit of an asterisk next to this because Chris Jones is still holding out. And we are on kickoff day, and Chris Jones has still not reported, and he's still not in the building yet. And we don't know at this point when he's going to come out of this holdout. But when he's playing, he's one of the best, if not the best defensive tackle in the NFL. He's such a dominant pass rusher, and he's a guy that teams circle as we need to find a way to stop him. And not having him here just sort of really puts a damper on this unit because having him there just opens up opportunities for everybody else because everyone's focusing on him. And without him here, your best pass rusher is George Karlaftis, who they drafted in the first round last year out of Purdue. And he was a high floor guy, really strong, good as a bull rusher, but he was a guy that still needs to develop a little bit as far as diversifying his pass rush moves. But he's your best pass rusher at this point in time, and the rest of these guys just kind of suck, man. This is not a good group. Missing Chris Jones and having George Karlaftis your best, this is not a good group. Derek Nottie is okay, but he has to be this team's number one defensive tackle, and that's not a good sign whatsoever. And then Trayshawn Wharton and Mike Dana, they're just backup level guys that are being asked to start, and I don't really like that at all. But luckily for the Kansas City Chiefs, you get to sing a little bit of a different tune when it comes to the linebacking group, where they do rank number one in this division. Willie Gay and Nick Bolton have quietly been one of the best, if not the best, linebacking duo in the NFL. I'll start with Willie Gay first. He's just a really good player, really good athlete, really good sideline to sideline speed. He's just a really good linebacker to have in the modern NFL. And then Nick Bolton has quietly been one of the best linebackers in the NFL. He was sort of like a question mark when he was drafted out of Missouri. And he's improved every single year he's been in the league. And he has asserted himself as a true dominant Mike linebacker. Really good in coverage, really good coming downhill against the run. And he's been one of the bigger surprises in the NFL for sure. And then number two at the linebacking position is the Denver Broncos with Josie Jewell and Alex Singleton. They're both pretty much the same player, though Jewell is a little bit better of an athlete than Singleton. Neither are like great athletes. Jewell is just a really good old school linebacker, though he doesn't have the size of an old school linebacker, but more so in that he just can come downhill, can play the run really well. Neither guy is really great in coverage. They're both sort of flat-footed at times. They're one of these guys where they're just sort of covering grass and they just sort of have their arms out and they're not really covering any particular player. But they're both just solid. And then number three is the Chargers. Eric Kendricks has taken a bit of a downtick in his career. He's definitely on the decline. There was a point in time in Minnesota where he was one of the best linebackers in the NFL. He's not like that anymore. He's taken a bit of a on the decline as far as coverage goes, where he was one of the best coverage linebackers in the league, if not the best coverage linebacker in the league at his peak. But he's not that kind of player anymore. He is older. And, he's still a good starting linebacker, but he's much more, he's not in the top 10 conversation as he once was. And then Kenneth Murray is just sort of, honestly, I think Kenneth Murray is approaching bust territory, if I'm being completely honest. They spent a first-round pick on him a couple of years ago, and he has not returned that value. He's still a great athlete with good speed, but he just still, even despite the fact that he's been in the league for, going on 4 years now, he still plays like he doesn't know how to play the position, which is weird to me considering how long he's been in the league for at this point. So yeah, he's approaching bust territory for sure for me. And then number four is the Raiders. Robert Spillane is just sort of below average. He's okay against the run. He's a bit of a thumper. You kind of expect that of a Pittsburgh linebacker, but he's sort of just below average at everything. And then Divine Diablo, he's a former safety at Virginia Tech, moved into linebacker full-time because he's just too big to play safety. And he's just sort of okay as a linebacker. He's the guy that you're sort of, out of these guys, you're kind of, I guess, excited for. Though you're not really excited for either of these guys. He would kind of be that upside guy. And that's pretty much it as far as the linebacking groups go. And then last, but certainly not least, we're talking about these secondary units. And each one of these teams actually have some pieces that I'm actually really intrigued and excited to watch. Number one is the Denver Broncos for me. And a lot of that has to do with their young corner tandem that I'm actually really excited to see how they come along. Pat Surtain, he's already become one of the 5 best corners in the NFL. You know, we all knew he was kind of like a high upside, borderline high floor guy coming out of Alabama a couple of years ago. And he had a really good rookie year, and he has slowly become one of the elite corners in football. Just such a great man-to-man guy. Just a big body, physical corner that's going to beat you up on the outside. You know, he's one of the elites. There's really nothing else to say. And then Damari Mathis, opposite of him, who was drafted out of Pittsburgh last year and played pretty well as a rookie. You know, he's another one of these, sticky man-to-man corners, but is also comfortable in zone. You know, he's a really good player to keep an eye on. I expect a bit of a breakout for him this year. And then at safety, Justin Simmons isn't one of the elite safeties of the league that he once was, even last year around this time. But he's still one of the better free safeties in the NFL. Just so rangy, really good instincts at the safety position. Also is really physical enough to come down and support in the run game, which, a lot of free safeties it depends on what you're getting from them. But Justin Simmons is really willing as a run defender from the free safety spot. And then Caden Stearns won the strong safety job. And, he's been a really good backup player for a while now. And was a good special teamer. So he's going to get a full-time starting reps at strong safety. So I'm really excited and intrigued to see what he can be. And then at slot corner is something called an Asang Basie. Your guess on him is as good as mine. And then number 2 is the Chargers. And again, high upside group, but it's kind of the same thing with their receiving core where it's like they just need to stay healthy. Because Derwin James, he's been another guy that's battled injuries, but when he's played, he's been arguably the best safety in football. Just a physical player. A lot more rangy than you'd expect a strong safety to be. But he's just such a great instinctive player. Always seems to know where the ball is. He's a safety that hits like a linebacker. And there's nothing else to say about him. When he's healthy, he's one of the best safeties, if not the best safety in football. And free safety, Alohi Gilman is just okay. I don't really know what you're going to get out of him. You're hoping Derwin stays healthy because you don't want a situation where Gilman is your best safety. He's fine, decent range, decent athlete, but really nothing else to that. Not really a high upside guy. And then these corners, J.C. Jackson, they paid a lot of money to in the offseason last year and got hurt towards the middle of the season. But even before that, he wasn't playing up to his contract, He was not the same instinctive player that he was when he was in New England. This seems to be the theme for a lot of these expatriates where they play really well and then they go to another team on a big contract and then they all of a sudden don't play as well. He was kind of looking like that for J.C. Jackson, and then he got hurt. So who knows? An extra year in this system. We'll see. Coming back healthy. We'll see if he can go back to being the J.C. Jackson of old. And then Michael Davis was a really surprising player last year. Stepped in, was a backup for a while, was asked to come in and played pretty well last year. Was sort of like an instinctive ball hawking guy. Was pretty sticky in man coverage. He was a really good surprise last year, and he's asserted himself as a starter for this team. And then Asante Samuel, listed as their starting slot corner, which I feel like that's the best spot for him because in man-to-man coverage, he's very hit or miss, at least on the outside, that is. But he's such a great athlete. He's such a great ball hawk. I mean, you could tell he got that from his dad, who was a great corner in the NFL for a long time. So he's a really fun young player. And then number 3 is the Kansas City Chiefs. And there are a couple players here that I really, really like. Starting with these corners, L'Jarius Sneed is probably just the most underrated corner in football right now. He's just really freaking good at everything. Really good man corner, really good zone corner, has really good ball skills and ball instincts. But for some reason, nobody seems to really talk about him. Not the best athlete in the world, but he's just so technically sound and so good at everything. Same with the slot corner, Trent McDuffie. You know, he has more physical upside than L'Jarius Sneed, but he's just as polished from a technique standpoint, and he's so physical. He's so good in man coverage, and he played really damn well as an outside corner last year, and I expect him to excel as a slot corner this year. And now Jalen Watson is going to be an outside corner starting this year. He was a 7th-round pick last year and played really well when given the opportunity to. So I expect him to have a bit of a uptick in production this year. And then the safety duo is really interesting. Justin Reed is kind of the same thing as L'Jarius Sneed, where he's one of the better safeties that not as many people talk about as they should. You know, he's just a really good physical player, really good as a run defender, but also much more rangy than you would expect out of a guy that plays strong safety because he does have free safety experience. But you're kind of hoping that Brian Cook asserts himself as a really good player because he has really good upside, Brian Cook does, as an athlete, but he's still just sort of learning how to play at the NFL level. And then number 4 is the Raiders, and there are some intriguing pieces here. Jacorian Bennett, I was surprised that he went undrafted. You know, Jacorian Bennett, you know, he was one of these speedsters at the Combine, and I figured somebody was going to draft him, but he ended up falling completely undrafted. The Raiders pick him up, and not only is he really fast, but he also is pretty solid. You know, his solid technique, solid in man coverage, and really just a solid corner that should have been drafted. And then Trayvon Moehrig was drafted a couple years ago out of TCU, yes. And he's just sort of been fine at the moment. You know, not the best coverage player, but he's just sort of been solid all around, and I expect him to at least develop a little more. And then Marcus Epps, they brought over, you know, played pretty good for the Philadelphia Eagles last year. He was kind of a surprise. You know, he played really, really well, really good coverage player. So I expect him to help along Trayvon Moehrig in his development a little bit. And then they just recently, just a few weeks ago, brought in Marcus Peters. He's been a veteran guy, kind of overrated at times. Made some Pro Bowls he shouldn't have made, but he's a big name because he's such a great ball hawking corner. Though he will lose quite a bit, but when the ball's thrown in his vicinity and he has a chance to make a play on it, he will make a play on it. So he's a good veteran to have in that regard. And then Nate Hobbs is a really good, sound starting slot corner that he came on last year, and he's a really good player to have in this secondary. But that is going to put a cap on this video. We're in the home stretch. We got one more to go. That will be coming out tomorrow. I will try and get it out as soon as possible. But like I said, if you have not already, please like, subscribe, and share the video. And my link to my Patreon, if you like to support the channel, will be in the description down below. But with that being said, I'm Double Diesel. Peace.